There's no denying the fact that I have a really big board game collection. From the floor all the way to the ceiling, and even from one wall to the next. G'day everybody, it's Danny here from Board Game Sanctuary. I'm an avid modern board gamer from Australia who loves sharing my passion for this hobby with you, my friends, and my family. And today we're going to be answering the question, what makes the perfect two-player board game? We'll be scouring high and low and searching through every crevice in my entire board game collection to find the perfect two-player game. So without further ado, let's get this video started. Hey Danny, I think I found the perfect two-player board game. Oh really? Which one? Wait a second. I forget to mention that I consider all of these to be perfect board games. So I take this card and place it in my tableau. One common feature that I often see in two-player games is that they sometimes feature a tug-of-war effect, and that is where two players are pitted head-to-head against each other, and the actions that one player takes moves the game towards their win condition, and then the action that the other player takes swings the game back towards their win condition. This to and fro, push and forth of different moves and making big swings in the game is something that really intrigues me when I'm searching for the perfect two-player board game. Games like Seven Wonders Duel has 3 win conditions, and if you satisfy one of those win conditions, you win the game. So in some ways, the tug-of-war effect in Seven Wonders Duel is a bit like a little triangle. By having this trifactor of different win conditions means that the game isn't always just about trying to fulfill the same goal. In one game, you might start out by trying to collect a variety of science symbols, and in the next game, you might really push that military marker really hard to try and throw your opponent off. And I think this is what is beautiful about the tug-of-war effect, that push and pull and changing directions and that flexibility to be able to go, you know what, I think the strategy for me isn't working right now. I might shift and focus on my other win con, which might be just getting the most amount of victory points by the end of age 3 and then holding that military marker back so the other player doesn't push it towards your side of the board. I liken this tug-of-war effect to games like tennis, where both of you feel evenly matched at the beginning and you hit that ball over the net and your opponent hits it back to you, and whichever player falters first and doesn't have a strong comeback is the player that's probably going to lose the game. When a lot of people think of the idea of tug-of-war, they often think of military games, but there are a lot of board games out there that definitely have that same tug-of-war feeling, but are dressed in a completely different theme. Hanamikoji is all about gaining the favor of 7 geishas, and what you really want to do in this game is you want to offer them the most enticing gifts and lure them towards your side. And basically, if you can lure the most gifts for a particular geisha, they'll send their favor over to you. And if you gain the favor of 4 geishas, or if you've gained the favor of geishas with a total value of 11 points, you're declared the winner of the game. And what's really interesting about this game is that it's all about giving gifts. Giving things to your opponent, whilst it might sound counterintuitive, it actually plays into the social and bluffing aspect of this game. You're splitting your hand of gifts into 2 piles and then offering some of them to your opponent to choose from, and then getting them to kind of suss out which 2 cards they might want to keep and return back to you. You're removing cards from the pool in the game. There's all of these nuanced interactions that makes you feel like you're at a really big social event. But the ultimate heart of the game is this push and pull of moving these tokens between you and your opponent. And the decisions in this game is really tough. It might be a matter of deciding which item you want to keep and giving the other 2 to your opponent. Even Paris, La Cité de la Lumière is a game all about taking up space. In this game, players are laying out cobblestones, and as players put out the cobblestones, they're building the foundations of where their buildings are going to be placed in the subsequent round. This is a tug-of-war on a more 2-dimensional level, filling up the box, filling up the grid with potentially future game-changing moves is something that also has a cool tug-of-war effect When you ask the general public about two-player board games that they know, chess is often one of the first games that rolls off the tongue, and whilst I'm not a fan of chess, I can appreciate its design, its depth, and the layers that are contained within. I think what makes chess really quite interesting is the thrill of the chase, and this is something that I want to tap into when looking for a high-quality two-player game. The idea that you can capture or trap your opponent and lead them into situations where it feels like the walls are closing in. And the thrill of the chase is often what makes two-player games quite fun. I like the tactical movement of a lot of games that are similar to chess. I also like the rising tension that it brings to the table, the sense that your opponent is making stronger moves than you are, so you're going to have to react with even more powerful moves or find an avenue to escape. This sense of spatial restriction, but also configuring and figuring out all of the different options that you have to try and maneuver and swing the game back in your favor is something that I often look for. And games that feature this capturing your opponent mechanism are games like HIVE, which is basically insect version of chess, where you've got these hexagonal shaped insect tiles. The insects that come in this game have different abilities. You've got grasshoppers that can jump in a straight line, ants that can move around the periphery of the hive structure, and then you've got this idea that you've got to surround your opponent's queen and being able to capture them and then chase them and then use all of your abilities to maneuver these pieces in a way that will stop your opponent from winning just feels immensely exciting. That tension of, oh my goodness, my queen is trapped by, 5 pieces, but if I can use this pillbug piece, I can flip it and then let it escape. That thrill of getting out of a really tight, close-knit situation where you're just about to lose the game is something that really brings me back. Another game that I really like is ONITAMA, which is basically a slimmed and simplified version of chess where you're only playing with 5 different action cards. But what makes it so nuanced is that it makes it feel more approachable. Here are 5 different moves that your pieces can take. You can only use one of those actions on your turn, but then you've got to put it into a shared area where the other player can access that action on a subsequent future turn. And that just adds a huge new dynamic to a game that I thought I knew really well. Then you've got games like Star Wars Rebellion, which is a big thematic beast where you've got, the Imperial Army trying to locate the rebel base, and the rebels are trying to, hide their location and try and thwart the Imperial Army's plans. This game plays out like the original trilogy of episode 4, 5, and 6 of Star Wars, and the tension is high. I like to describe this two-player experience as a cat and mouse experience where you've got, Death Stars coming at you, swarms of troopers, and you are just literally escaping by the skin of your teeth. And the other game that also has a similar feeling but it has a completely different theme is Santorini. I love Santorini because you start with this open board and the game literally takes 30 seconds to teach. You move, you place a piece, and then you keep doing this until one player gets to the 3rd level. But as you build Santorini out on this abstract board, the walls start closing in not only 3 dimensions, but also spatially as well. And that rising tension of blocking your opponent's worker, trying to, outcompete for that space as you climb on top of each other to get to that 3rd level, and you cap little domes onto potentially winning spots, means that you have this kind of chasing element in the game. Now, as I was scouring my board game collection, I discovered that there's a group of two-player games out there where information is the key to driving the game itself. Games where each player only has half of the picture, half of the puzzle, half of the solution, half of the information, just made me realize that, we just have this innate curiosity inside ourselves as human beings to just want to know the answers to everything. And that's what part of life is, learning about the answers to things we know and discovering the answers to things we didn't know. And so by harnessing that concept itself in a board game just creates for such a tense and dynamic experience. One of my favorite games I often like to suggest to new gamers is CODENAMES DUET. It's basically a cooperative version of the game where you're working together and you basically have a key card that has half of the puzzle only on the side that you can see. So my side that you can't see on the camera is different to your side. Some of our answers actually overlap. What's beautiful about Codenames Duet is that you're collectively trying to give each other one-word clues and a number to link words together so that you can both collectively identify 15 spies altogether. But beware, there are 3 different assassins that are hidden out on the field, which adds a huge layer of tension to it because you don't really want to make a mistake. What's really cool about this is that the information they give to my partner then reveals things about the puzzle that I'm seeing, and then clues that they give to me reveals information about the puzzle that they're seeing. That cool overlap of information means that we can really decipher this curious puzzle together and try and win the game. And what's really cool about having only half the solution is that you can create some really cool logic-based games where players could be redecorating a house, deciding what color to paint the walls. And Decorum is a game which I like to play at 2 players only, where you each have 2 different win conditions. And if you satisfy both of the win conditions, you're happy. You live in harmony for the rest of the month or the year that you decide to stay together in that relationship. What's really cool about Decorum is that you're negotiating and you're changing and replacing and adding different items and looking at the response of your partner and seeing whether they're happy with the changes that you've made. Just kind of like moving together in real life. And what's really cool is that maybe I might like a really red themed house and your partner might like a really green themed house, but both of those colors might clash at some point as you're trying to solve and negotiate this puzzle together. And what's beautiful about Decorum is that it not only emulates that feeling of moving in together, but also creates for a really nuanced way of communicating your information. Now, when shall I ask the hubby about using his bookshelf as the next storage space for my board game collection? I'll do it next week. And then you've got beautiful 2-player tile laying games like Land vs. Sea, where both of the information that you're holding is on both sides of your tile. In Land vs. Sea, one player is trying to enclose regions of water, the other player is enclosing regions of land. And if you've got both of those terrains on your tile, that makes you a very powerful person because you can close your ocean in and make an inland lake, or you can open up your opponent's land so that they're going to have a really hard time in finishing that off. With the abundance of board games coming out every year, games are often looking for ways to reinvent themselves. And one thing that game designers often consider is that every game experience that you have with a game should feel different from the next. This variability and making games feel like they're not just a single note game means that it's actually a really important part of making a game feel fresh, even though you're playing the same game multiple times. The introduction of asymmetry, which is basically giving each player in the game a specific power or a specific playstyle or a specific approach to the game, is really important into integrating into modern board game design. And so 2-player games are definitely is a great place to put asymmetry, and that's because you can kind of have this cool binary yin and yang complementary effect where one player might play a certain way but the other player might complement that strategy in a certain way. It could be 2 polar approaches to trying to satisfy a win condition, or it could be inviting direct head-to-head conflict whilst doing 2 different things at the same time. Games like MINDBUG are super small in size, but super expansive in the way the games play out. In MINDBUG, players are trying to cast creatures and then use those creatures to get their opponents down from 3 health points to 0 health points. But what's really interesting is that each of these creatures has a different strength and power value, and they have different abilities. And you can only attack with 1 creature per turn. So when you attack with a creature with 10 is going to be able to kill a creature with 5 because its strength value is higher. But the creature value of 5 might have special abilities that allows it to either sneak past high creatures, or it might be able to get cards back out from, the graveyard onto the battlefield, or it might even be able to, hunt or cause a frenzy to occur. So MINDBUG is a really cool game where the order that you play your creatures at is the asymmetry in the game. And there's another level of MINDBUG that I think really blows the mind, and that is the fact that you have two opportunities throughout the game to be able to steal your opponent's creature. So if you see your opponent play out a really big creature, like, ooh, I don't want to deal with that, you can MINDBUG it, and then now it becomes yours. And you've now crafted your strategy based on what you choose to steal. The other game that I want to talk about is Star Realms. The idea that you've got all these 4 different factions, and each faction has a particular playstyle. You've got one faction which allows you to trash certain cards from your deck, one faction that has little bases out. And so by starting with a core deck of cards and then buying particular factions from the market means that you can really hone down the faction style that you want to play as. So if you want a game where you're just building lots of bases, then that is the play style that you're going to go with for that game. Or if you want to do one where you can cull your deck to increase its efficiency, then go with that. Or maybe you want to experiment and combine 2 different particular factions. Another game that I really enjoy is a game called Skulk Hollow. Skulk Hollow is a game where one player plays as the Fox and Heroes and the other player plays as one of these giant beasts. Think of that PlayStation game Shadow of the Colossus. Basically, you're playing through a deck of cards and the Fox and Heroes are trying to nullify all of the beast's weak points, and the beast is trying to crush the Fox and Heroes and obliterate them all. So each player is playing something completely different. The Fox and Heroes are trying to be more strategic. They're trying to use all the different attributes of the different heroes in their deck to outmaneuver the big giant beast creature, and the player who's playing the giant beast creature is using their beast's special ability to try and satisfy their win condition before the Fox and Heroes can kill them. So you've got this whole interplay, and you're really actually playing 2 very different games, but somehow they connect together, they complement together really well to create for a really fascinating dynamic experience. What really impresses me about a lot of these 2-player games is that they can take a really big theme, a big idea, or what could have been potentially a big multiplayer Euro, and condenses it down into a small box game that still has that grandiose feeling. The idea that you can manipulate resources, build an engine, and still do the same sort of actions that you would do in a much larger scale game, as you can see as one I've got right here, Tekkenu, and still have that great satisfying feeling that you've played a really heavy game. And so 2-player games are not shy of being really meaty and really gritty. And games like Curious Cargo probably has one of the most thinkiest puzzles I've ever seen in a 2-player game. The idea of connecting pipes, you've got these delivery trucks that you kind of push across the board to the other player, and I guess you're almost trying to help each other package and deliver goods in order to get victory points. Games like this just really show me that 2-player games can be super deep and super thinky. But what I really like about 2-player games is the fact that everything feels like a gift. They give you a pool of resources, and how you manipulate these resources to not only get a benefit for yourself, but to leave a benefit behind for another player is a really subtle interaction that I often see in 2-player games. In fact, I have a whole pile of 2-player games to show you. Games like Jaipur, where you're given a market, and whether you decide to collect a particular type of fabric or collect a set of camels. Jaipur is all about taking what you think benefits you right now and leaving behind what you think will benefit the other player, but at a lesser extent. It's a beautiful set collection game with an awesome theme. Then I've got a similar game called CANOPY, which is a rainforest theme, which has you sifting through piles of cards until you decide there's a set of cards that you really want, and because whatever cards you take, there's different ways to score the cards that you take into your tableau. However, everything that you take isn't necessarily positive. There are some things that do hurt you, but also some things that give you a lot of points, and you're also building these cool, tall trees as well. A lot of these 2-player games like to give you the ultimate board game moral dilemma. So in terms of looking at all of these different perspectives and all these different board games, which 2-player game do I think is perfect in my opinion? Well, they're all kind of perfect in their own little way. Sometimes I might want to just play a chess-like game like Hive with my partner, or maybe I want to play DECORUM and think about redecorating my house. It depends on the feeling that I have on the day, and it depends whether that game taps into those aspects that I talked all the way throughout the video. There are some games that hits all of those 5 checkpoints a lot better than games that might only hit 2. And that's not a bad thing, because sometimes just doing one thing well is better than doing lots of things well. But when a game can really leave that everlasting feeling of like, wow, wasn't that a great thinky experience? Oh, that game was so close. Oh, I loved how the game really pushed us in all these different directions. And every time you get that game out, you get that really inner warm glow about playing that game again, and it lingers in your memory for days, months, and even years. That's probably a sign that that game is going to be perfect for you. And one of those games that I guess, if you really want a title for me to attach to this, is Hive. I just love Hive. It's a variation of chess. It has really cool thinky moves. It's tactile, it's portable, it's travel worthy. I can play it at the pool, at the beach, and I know I'm just gonna have such a great time playing Hive. It has all those elements of the thrill of the chase, asymmetric powers and abilities, the idea of this open information that gets slowly revealed as you place insects out onto this structure that's ever evolving and changing. And I think for me personally, Hive was the first 2-player board game I actually purchased, and it was recommended by a friend of mine. And ever since I bought that game over 7 years ago, I still have it and hold it in close regard today. So if you really want me to attach your name and answer that question, then Hive would be my perfect 2-player board game. So what did you think of this deep dark dive down the 2-player board game rabbit hole? Was there a game that piqued your interest, or maybe there was one that I didn't include? Please start a conversation in the comment section below. Now I want to emphasize the point that there are so many great multiplayer games out there that are also really great at 2 players. And if you want to discover some of my top picks, head over to my main YouTube page, because there's a game called Euro games that are perfect for 2 that are usually played at the multiplayer level. That's a really interesting video that's worth checking out. Now, if you really like the content that you've seen so far, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel, or head over to my Patreon page to make future board game video suggestions. This is Danny signing out. Hope to see you again soon, and make sure your next game is an amazing one.